Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is James Roberts. Welcome to the May 3rd edition of Effective, Efficient, Affordable, and above all, accountable to you. The show that takes a good hard look at government here in Winstead and asks whether you are getting a good deal, whether you are getting any kind of deal at all, or whether you are just being taken advantage of. As always, and by way of reminder, the views expressed on this show, the beliefs expressed on this show are those of myself, James Roberts. They are not those, they do not intend to reflect those of the Winchester Board of Education or of the Gilbert School Board. On this evening's program, we will focus initially on the outcome of the 5-month state investigation into the Board of Education's accounting practices, specifically into the $636,000 worth of question costs, disallowed costs identified by our auditors. Then we'll take a look at where we stand vis-a-vis the budget currently, the town budget, and if we have time at the end, we'll take a quick look at a couple of unrelated topics, the farmers market and the capital products building. So let's begin with the state investigation into the school board. This has been 5 months in the making, many hundreds, perhaps even thousands of man-hours. Let us first debunk a myth. This investigation was not prompted by yours truly. The simple fact of the matter is that the Office of Management and Budget, the OMB, the largest single branch of the executive in Washington, D.C., requires by law that should any accountant anywhere in the United States find an adverse finding with respect to any expenditure of federal dollars, that the local jurisdiction must look into that, must launch an investigation. And the investigation that we have had for the last 5 months, looking very narrowly into those question costs, is the result, the lawful result, of that OMB requirement. Now let's be clear, I and others did convey concerns to the Office of the Inspector General of the Federal Department of Education in D.C. We expressed concerns over what we regarded as insufficient oversight by the Board of Education, a lack of oversight which was such as to allow our school district to maintain multiple sets of books and records, that allowed them to show the same federal dollars being spent on a range of completely different things, something which we felt to be wholly inappropriate and perhaps representative of larger and more serious matters. The fact of the matter, ladies and gentlemen, is that the federal government, it seems, has bigger fish to fry than financial shenanigans here in Winstead, and no further action was taken in respect of that notice. The 5-month investigation that has been ongoing and which wrapped up last week was, as I say, specifically and narrowly the result of the auditor's findings. So what happened last week? On Thursday of last week, the state of Connecticut contacted the school district to tell them that the state would take no further action with respect to the 9-10 audit. No further action beyond requiring the repayment of $1,826. This agreement was codified in a letter of Friday dated April 27th, which said, and I paraphrase, "Don't do it again." Seriously, don't do it again. We beg of you, don't do it again. We will be looking over your shoulder as we beg of you. Please don't do it again. Pretty please don't do it again. This was a home run for the schools, ladies and gentlemen, faced with the prospect of paying hundreds of thousands of dollars back to the federal authorities. The state of Connecticut has arrived at a conclusion at which just $1,826 will be payable. This removes a major distraction from the Board of Education. This allows them to proceed with the serious business at hand, that of changing our school district for the better, of actually making our schools work for our children and our community. This removes a major source of embarrassment from our community. And let's face it, ladies and gentlemen, there really would have been no educational benefit from our having to repay hundreds of thousands of dollars. It would serve not one iota of benefit. No test score would be improved. No building would be improved. Nothing positive would come of it. Equally, it's a benefit, it's a home run for the administration of Governor Malloy, for the bureaucracy in Hartford. As the Malloy administration seeks to push through the state legislature an ambitious program of educational reform, the last thing they needed to have in the press was their trampling all over the home rule rights of the town of Winchester, of their stomping all over the Winchester Board of Education. So from a situation in which our auditors identify and disallow $636,000 worth of costs, Hartford has concluded that a repayment of just $1,826 should suffice. A home run, as I say, for the schools. And what of you and I, ladies and gentlemen? What is the impact on us as taxpayers? Well, it's a mixed bag. On the one hand, we too don't have to come up with $636,000, and that can only be seen as a good thing. In a year when our exalted selectmen are requiring us to come up with a 10% increase in local taxation, we need a $636,000 bill to the federal authorities like we need a hole in the head. From that short-term perspective, this is a good outcome for we the taxpayers. But as taxpayers, we have a legitimate right to expect our government to work for us on our behalf, to expect our government to tell us where our money is being spent, to expect our government to make full and timely and accurate and complete disclosure. We the taxpayers, I think, have a legitimate right to have expected the state to deliver a very stern message, not just to the school board, but to government here in Winsted generally. A very stern message that says you have a legal obligation to provide full, complete, responsible oversight. We have a legitimate right to believe that the state should have delivered an equally firm message, not just to the government here in Winsted, but to we citizens. A message that said we have an obligation, not a legal obligation, but certainly a civic obligation to ensure that our government does the right thing. I believe we had a right to expect those messages, ladies and gentlemen, to expect the state to be quite stern in its response. And we did not get that. We got a letter that said, please, we beg of you, pretty please, don't do it again. But before we get too carried away with the celebration, let's just remember really what the letter says. The letter does not say that we did no wrong. On the contrary, the letter says, you did wrong, don't do it again, we're looking over your shoulder, you will not get a free pass next time. And where does that leave the town? For the town, ladies and gentlemen, this is a little bit of a nightmare. Winsted, I think we can all agree, stands at a crossroads. Opinion differs as to where the next step forward will be. There are some who contend that the step forward for Winsted progress will come in the form of a mega bond. 30, 40, 50, $60 million worth of borrowing, maybe $100 million worth of borrowing. A mega bond to build new schools, new firehouses, a new town hall, a new senior center, a new police station, who knows, maybe even a new hospital. That is one view of the next step for Winsted. There is a second view, ladies and gentlemen. There are people like me who believe that the next step forward is for us as a community to make it quite clear to welcome developers to our town, to encourage developers to our town, to make it easy for developers to come to our town and begin to rehabilitate our town. Now, each of those two parties believes that the other lives in cloud cuckoo land. I believe passionately, I can say hand on heart, that the town of Winsted has zero access to 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 or $100 million of borrowing. We simply are not able to borrow the money to build those new schools, those new firehouses, that new police station, the senior center, the town hall. Not going to happen. The other side is equally passionate, ladies and gentlemen. They say no developer will come to town until we have spent that money, until we have made town a prettier place. We're not going to solve this issue here tonight. But both sides do agree on one thing. Whether you are a socially progressive lender who measures progress in school buildings and classrooms and school desks, or whether you are a grubby developer who measures progress in dollars and cents and mill buildings rehabilitated, both parties are going to do exactly the same thing before they invest a dime in Winsted. They are going to look at the financials of our town and they are going to persuade themselves, or seek to persuade themselves, that our town is a viable community with a long-term financial future. They're going to look to our financials, ladies and gentlemen, and what are they going to see? They're going to see audits that are 6, 7, 8, 11 months late. They are going to see financial controls completely missing. They are going to see the largest question costs ever in the history of the state, and they're going to see a 5-month state investigation that failed either to give us a clean bill of health or to give us a clear roadmap as to how to avoid future problems. They're going to see the sword of Damocles, a sword of Damocles hanging over our community's head. They're going to see a letter from the state that says we will be looking over your shoulder. Don't do it again, Winstead, because we're looking over your shoulder, because we have given you the only free pass that you are going to get, because you have used 8 of your 9 lives. That is what a developer or a lender is going to see, ladies and gentlemen. They're going to see uncertainty. And that is the one thing that neither the lender nor the investor can stomach. Not knowing when the state is going to throw the book at us, how the state is going to throw the book at us, for what the state is going to throw the book at us, is a killer for our town. So where does this put it? What have we learnt from this? Hopefully, we, the Board of Education, as well as the broader government here in Winstead, has learnt from what must surely be a near-death experience, that the way forward has to be a renewed and clear commitment to transparency, to absolute financial accountability. We must abandon the way of the past, the secrets and the games and the obfuscation and all of the things that have made Winstead what Winstead has become in the last several years. We must demonstrate that we have the political will and the political ability to move the community forward if we are ever to gather the money to do so. I hope that that is what we have learned from this experience. I hope that what we have not learned from this experience, I hope that the conclusion that is drawn either by the school board or by the town as a whole is not that the state will allow us to do anything we like, that the state will take any piece of paper that we choose to file with them, with any number on it that we choose to put on it, with any statement, any words that we choose to write on that piece of paper, and file it away and say, good, we got the paper. I hope that the lesson isn't that the state will allow us to do whatever we want, because we know there are consequences to our actions, ladies and gentlemen. We skated on this one, we got the free pass, but we know we will not get it again. Which brings us to the budget. On Monday, you will have the opportunity to go to a town meeting at the Gilbert School and express your views on the budget that has been recommended by the Board of Selectmen. A budget which calls for a 10% increase in taxation. That, I believe, is the highest increase of any municipality in the state of Connecticut. If I'm wrong, I'm sure someone will correct me. The town of New Britain reduced their request this week from a double-digit tax increase to a 7.5% tax increase, and few seriously expect that to happen either. Winstead, I believe, is the outlier at 10%. The Board of Selectmen have been clear, crystal clear, in how they look at the budget. The 5 supermajority Democrats have said that $1.8 million in new taxation is more than offset by $200,000 in new roads and a little under $100,000 in spending on the schools to reduce the number of people that we will need to eliminate. I don't understand that math, ladies and gentlemen. That's Democrat math. 1.8 million in new taxes, 300,000 in benefit. But that's their math, and they're sticking to it. The Democrats say the rich will pay the 10% tax increase. The rich have to pay the 10% tax increase. The Republican minority on the Board of Selectmen have been equally clear, ladies and gentlemen. They have said that they see no real, lasting, tangible benefit to a 10% tax increase. They have said it's worse. Not only is there no benefit for a 10% tax increase, we are actually being put further into the hole. We're being asked to make commitments 5 years out with respect to finance arrangements, lease arrangements, fees, and interest. We're being asked to make long-term commitments in benefits and salaries for existing and new employees. They say, notwithstanding the fact that every major stock index reached a 4-year high this week, that we in Winstead are not at a 4-year high in terms of our prosperity, in terms of our financial outlook. And they say it is not the rich who will pay for this tax increase. It is every one of you, the taxpayers of our town. So the Board of Selectmen have been clear, if divided, on the budget. There has been less clarity from the schools. Gilbert obviously is a private institution. It does not, generally speaking, take a view on political matters, last year's opposition to the budget notwithstanding. And following that rule, they have not taken a view on this year's budget. I think it would be fair to say, however, that if you were to ask individual members of that board, they would likely tell you that this is probably as good as it gets. The view from the Winchester schools is more mixed. Superintendent Dannehy issued a press release, a blistering press release, that described the budget as wholly inadequate, as eviscerating the schools. There followed a less than flattering editorial in the Winstead Journal, and what was probably some very private shouting and spanking behind closed doors, which resulted in another press release. A press release in which the budget is now fine and dandy with the Winchester schools. Is it any wonder, ladies and gentlemen, that we have a tough time making decisions? It's unacceptable, it eviscerates, it's fine and dandy. Which begs the question, where do I stand on this budget? For the record, and I think I have been consistent on this score, I am not a supporter of this budget. I cannot and will not support any budget that places a premium on spending more at the expense of spending smart. I understand, I think we all understand, that if we are to have real, tangible, long-lived investments in our community, we will need to pay for them. But this budget does not deliver real, long-lived, tangible benefits. There is no major infrastructure upgrade in this budget. There are no new school buildings in this budget. There is no school capital, period. There is no major investment in educational programs in this budget. There is nothing for existing businesses in this budget. There is nothing for new businesses in this budget. And there is nothing for development generally in this budget. There are no lasting, real, tangible benefits. Now, we also understand that if you have spent smart, if you have extracted every dollar from the existing budget, if you have eliminated every dollar of waste, every dollar of duplication, every dollar of inefficiency, if you have done all of that, and there are still real legitimate needs, then again, we understand that there will need to be additional spending. But we have not spent smart, ladies and gentlemen. We have not closed a school building. Every discussion of sharing educational resources yields the same result. It's complicated. It's difficult. We don't want to share control with the town. We certainly don't want to give control to Gilbert. We have not examined, much less right-sized, public works, fire. We have not examined the staffing requirements of town or the police department. The only changes we have made to benefits have been to change the benefits of that one poster child, that one town hall employee whose health benefits were reduced from $27,000 to $15,000 or $18,000, whatever it was. Which change, we understand, resulted in absolutely no reduction whatsoever in the benefits that individual takes home, such being the waste inherent in the benefit structures that we have both at the town and at the school. We have not spent smart, ladies and gentlemen, and therefore we cannot spend more. The simple reality is, how many 10% tax increases does anyone think Winstead can afford? If our civic leaders expect us to step up to the plate, to pay more in double digits, then we must have something real in return. On Monday, therefore, you may go to the town meeting, you may voice your opinions, you may listen to the opinions of others, and perhaps you will be swayed, perhaps you will change your mind one way or another. And at the end of that meeting, we will choose a day for a referendum, and we will move forward. If you agree with me, ladies and gentlemen, you will vote no at referendum. And if you disagree with me, if you think that I'm full of you-know-what, you will vote yes. And to be quite clear, to be crystal clear, ladies and gentlemen, I have no problem with your voting yes. I have no problem with this budget, much as I disagree with it personally. I have no problem with this budget passing by an overwhelming margin, as long as those of you who vote for it are willing to accept the consequences of that vote. As long as you understand and accept that such a vote will result in more businesses leaving town, in more businesses failing, in more homes standing empty on your streets, in more foreclosures. Don't get me wrong, there are people in our community who can afford a 10% increase in taxes. There are people who get guaranteed pay raises year in and year out, who get gold-plated health benefits, who get great pension plans. They are called public employees. Our mayor is a school teacher here in town. Our deputy mayor is a public school administrator. Selectman Jim DeVita, a retired state employee. Some people can afford a 10% increase. But they are the minority, ladies and gentlemen. A 10% increase in taxes does nothing for the hard-working citizen looking for a job. Does nothing for the hard-working citizen trying to forestall foreclosure. Does nothing for the hard-working citizen trying to sell his home. Does nothing for the hard-working businessman trying to keep his business afloat. A 10% increase in taxes may indeed be a cup of coffee for the strict minority of our citizens, but for the majority it is the difference between making it and not making it here in Winsted. So in summary, the resolution of the state's investigation into the Board of Education here in town was that we Winsted are on our own. The state cannot or will not do anything to help us other than looking over our shoulder and making veiled threats. We are on our own. We are on our own, ladies and gentlemen. We must sort out our problems by exercising good judgment, by making it clear to our government that they must act in our best interests, and that they must disclose their actions. Which brings us to the last two topics I'd like to cover briefly. At the last Board of Selectmen meeting, the topic of the farmers market came up. You will recall last summer the farmers market met on a Friday afternoon at the East End Park. This is a good thing, ladies and gentlemen. They bring new people to town. It is a cultural event. It allows our citizens to purchase nutritious local produce. For this to happen, peddling fees and penalties must be waived. A princely sum of $125. One would imagine that this would have been a quick discussion at the Board of Selectmen. $125 to allow the farmers market to come to Winsted and thrive. This turned into a 25-minute marathon. A marathon whose consensus at the end of the day was that as long as the farmers market does not attract a single new customer, as long as the farmers market does not attract a single new vendor, we will welcome it to Winsted. But if, God forbid, the farmers market should succeed, if it should thrive, if it should grow, if it should bring more farmers to our town, if it should bring more visitors to our town to spend their dollars in our town, then we want nothing to do with it. That's judgment, Winsted style. This week we read in the newspapers that the Capital Products Building, Mike Renzullo's project, has successfully negotiated the release of all liens against the property, and that the property is now available for lease. I have been vocal in the past in saying that I find Selectman Renzullo's claims as to what he will do with this property wholly unbelievable. Now let me be quite clear. If Selectman Renzullo is able to do half of what he has said he can do, if he is able to bring businesses here to town, if he is able to turn Capital Products into an economically viable, long-term asset for our community, if he is able to do that with no experience, with no money, with no financial backing, and no support from the town other than the $85,000 that we have already given him, then I will take my hat off to Selectman Renzullo, because that will be a home run, ladies and gentlemen. That will be a huge, huge success. I just don't think he can do it. To be clear, if we have a bakery operating in the Capital Products building anytime soon, I will eat my hat. I will eat crow. I will eat humble pie. I will eat anything you like, ladies and gentlemen, with the possible exception of the cake baked in that chemical wasteland. Because that's what we are being offered, ladies and gentlemen. implausible claims by a man running for statewide office, neglecting apparently his duties as a selectman. As always, we have choices. The state has made it clear that if we are to deal successfully with the crossroads that we are presented with, we must use our good judgment. We must require our government to work to good effect. We must require our government to disclose fully what is happening. We must act as citizens and require these things. We must look over our government's shoulder. We must demand that our newspapers do the same. I, for one, will continue to ask questions. I, for one, will continue to probe the answers that I receive. At the top of this program, I made reference to the fact that I had written to the United States Department of Education to voice concerns over oversight. Board of Ed Chair Hofnagel termed that communication, she termed it in writing, as harassment. She views it as harassment when I ask questions, when I probe the answers that I am given. Ladies and gentlemen, it is up to you to decide whether that is indeed harassment. But I am telling you that I will continue to ask those questions, and I will continue to press for answers, and I will continue to probe those answers. Because that, I believe, is what a good citizen should do. And just as a good citizen should bring to the attention of the authorities things which he or she believes to be inappropriate, so that good citizen must accept the consequences of the authorities' decision. I accept the fact that the state of Connecticut has given us a free pass. I welcome it as a taxpayer. I regret it from the perspective of no stern message delivered. And I hope that we learn from it. I hope that we learn that only transparency, only accountability, only asking questions, and only acting both with the best interests of our town and with good judgment can we move forward. Because eating cake baked in the chemical wasteland that is Mike Renzillo's Capital Products is no substitute for moving forward as a community here in Winsted, is no substitute for getting a government and for maintaining a government that is effective and efficient and affordable and at all accountable to we the people. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.